Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and John Moore is here. His website is thelibertyman.com, and John has a radio program 6 to 7 a.m. Monday to Friday Central Standard Time on the Republic Radio, and co-host with Ann Morrison, scientist. John has lots of contacts inside the government. He also is a specialist on forensic investigations. That's what his job is, of all kinds of crime scenes. Former Special Forces trainer for armaments and special preparedness. In fact, if you have someone that needs to have a what I call a full-on preparedness consult, John's the gentleman to contact, whether you're getting a container ready to go to the Cook Islands and you're a millionaire, or you just want to know basic things. We always talk about preparedness with John every Mondays, and of course Fridays we slide in a few preparedness things if they're appropriate on our preparedness, civil defense, earth changes, space weather, plagues, etc. hour, which is very popular. John, we've got a lot of geopolitical things happening, and the kind of the most remarkable thing to me is that the people that should do something haven't done anything. We have Michael Connolly on tomorrow, U.S. Justice Foundation, on the first hour, with articles of impeachment to the Congress. But, I mean, if they don't impeach this guy soon, he's going to either have us in a state of martial law or war or both. He'll collapse the dollar as they crush the Russian oil industry and force the Europeans to have their economy crash in the dark with no gas or oil. He'll have us embroiled in another expansive war that'll drive the price of oil right to the ceiling. Gold has taken off like a rocket since Obama's made his threats. And, of course, now the confusion happens on both sides because the Russians, there's no way they're going to admit that the Israelis tried to whack Mr. Putin, and Putin's certainly not going to admit it. Otherwise, he has to do something in countermeasures to the Israelis. Right. We know that the logic, if you actually dissect through the logic of it, firstly, the military analysis done by Tim Alexander, who's a military analyst, there's no way that the eastern Ukrainians had the technology to prosecute a BUK missile with radar systems to hit it. Number two, even Poroshenko, the maniac that he is, I can't see him doing that. So for even Mr. Putin to accuse the Kiev government for doing this, the Poroshenko government, I don't think that even holds water. It's not as likely, although it's possible. I don't see why they hit a commercial airliner, even if it is straight into that space, because, by the way, that airspace was already declared off limits for commercial airliners. So the airlines should have known that you don't go that area. In fact, the Malaysian airliner, the previous 9 or 10 times before that flight, all went south of that area and didn't go straight into Ukrainian airspace. So to me, there's something funny about this. We know that all of the evidence points to the Israelis whacked that plane, thinking that it was a Russian transport for the president of Russia. We also know that the Russians certainly can't admit it. Otherwise, they got to do something terrible right away. And of course, they're going to preserve that until it's actually World War III time. The Russians are already flying near the Pacific coast of California, within 50 miles, with their long-range Tupolev bombers. We know that the Russians have staged, even in the last few years, Russian nuclear submarines in the Gulf of Mexico. I think that we're pushing Russia to the point where they're going to reestablish new military and missile launch bases in not only Cuba, but Central America and Venezuela. I think we're just really asking for it, and we're going to get it in double barrels if we continue with idiot presidents like Obama, who, instead of wanting to make a financial deal so they can broaden their economy in Russia and we can have reasonable ties to get rid of the drug market, which is destroying their young people and our young people in our inner city, Obama is amplifying the problem. So, I mean, everything that the man does just turns to human fecal matter. And, of course, he's not just a puppet, he's an evil puppet. He's a dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality, a very abused person. He's a very shattered being. If you actually study from a psychiatric point of view, and their psychiatrists have now made analysis of Obama's behavior, it's very erratic. It's very typical of someone who basically is dealing with multiple personalities and some degree of psychosis as well as marginal mental function. In other words, really not very bright on top of being evil. So we need to pray for him. But we also need to get him the heck out of office because he's a danger to all of us. And we also have to rout out all of the so-called progressive fascists that are within the Democratic Party and the ones in the Republican Party that won't do their damn job, which is to remove Obama. And to get back to a constitutional republic where we have representative government, we need to get out of all these so-called treaties, and where Obama's even taking orders from the United Nations and NATO to decide when he's going to prosecute a war. Tomorrow we're going to talk with Michael about closing our southern border. We don't have a border. We've got basically an open sieve. And I believe that we need humanitarian aid for refugees like these kids that are coming up, but we don't want to have 16, 17, 18-year-old kids with MS-13 gang tag, tattoos on them coming from Central America. They're just itching to get into a gang up here so that they can then, quote, get back into a position of power living in America with a K and making money selling drugs and killing people. That's what's going to happen. So what do you think, John? I mean, where are we going with this?
Doctor, you mentioned a moment ago about articles of impeachment. Now, that can only originate from one place and one place only. That's the House Judiciary Committee.
Right, and those, by the way, sent from Michael Connolly and the U.S. Justice Foundation to that committee. It's sitting in committee now. There are several congressmen that are considering tabling it. It needs to go from there to something significant. Mr. Bonner basically is, I think, like a controlled opposition. He's in there basically to pretend he's doing something, but never really gets anything done.
Well, I've seen, and you're a medical doctor, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. The photographs I've seen of Mr. Boehner, he has the physical characteristics of an alcoholic to me, just looking at his face.
Yeah, he does. He looks like someone who's, as they say, an imbiber. But not only that, he looks like someone who's very guilty as well as being an imbiber. In other words, he's been bought and paid for or compromised. Maybe they got him in a hotel room with a 14-year-old on videotape, or maybe who knows what he's done. But there's something wrong, because if he just did his job...
Well, it's an old saying in Washington, D.C., never get caught in bed with a dead girl or a live boy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. That's funny. So, a number not so funny because it's real, unfortunately. What I think is going to happen is you're going to start seeing the cry, not just from the Republican Party, but the Democrats. As they get closer, and already the polls are actually telling the Democrats, and I was watching it on one of these television shows, and I don't want to mention the name because I don't want to give them any popularity, how the Democrats are kind of freaking out that their polls are telling them that they're going to get slaughtered in this next midterm election.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and the only reason why the Republicans are actually going to gain votes to a great extent is because the Democrats are getting more destroyed than they are. It's not because they're doing their job. It's because the Democrats have got a lot of guilt on them right now, but the Republicans are soon going to take over both the House and Senate. I believe that they're this is their presidential election to lose. I mean, the top candidate right now is Rand Paul. And even the Republican Party, they're attacking him and piling on to destroy him because he doesn't like the foreign policy of the U.S. government, which is to get involved in foreign entanglements. And Rand Paul, being a libertarian, basically is going back to the constitutional idea that maybe we shouldn't be involved in everybody else's war and policing the world. And if we do come into a country, we clean out the rat's nest of people causing the violence, like Hezbollah and these other characters. We restrain idiots like Israel and don't give them the weapons to prosecute a nuclear war. And we kind of stay out of involvements that's going to tick off countries like Russia. We work out things and try to collaborate from a position of strength, but instead we always seem to kind of... It's like we have the social graces of someone who's got Asperger's syndrome on a geopolitical level. How about that?
Oh, yes. Well, that's good, because I've dealt with people with Asperger's, and they have Zippo for social skills.
Right, and I see that happening with Obama. I mean, on a geopolitical level, we are geopolitically like America right now. Well, not a high-functioning Asperger's with a high IQ, or how about a marginal intelligence with a bloated attitude that Obama thinks he's always the most intelligent person in the room. Unfortunately, it's a very small room. He's probably in the bathroom alone.
Well, Doctor, let's just go. There's a couple of different directions I want to go today. First of all, one of my private confidential sources, a trusted person, out near Fort Carson, Colorado, they've been observing Russian military aircraft now for more than 2 years. We're actually into the third year. But in the last 72 hours, they've seen some Russian helicopters that they've never seen before.
Right.
I'm working to get more details about what these are, but they're large Russian military helicopters that have not been seen previously in the Fort Collins, Colorado area.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, of course, we've known this has cost multiple administrations, so it's not created under Obama. He's just the latest puppet. This was passed years ago to bring in Russian and Chinese. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we're joined with John Moore. We're going to play a little bit of a clip here, just literally at the top of drudgereport.com, and he does this is really good from Breitbart News. Our citizens are under siege. Perry sends National Guard to border. Let's play the first couple of minutes of that, Randy or Bordock.
And thank you all for being with us today. It's been approximately a month since I visited a federal detention facility in McAllen and saw firsthand the human tragedy unfolding along our southern border. The plight of these unaccompanied alien children has rightfully captured the national attention as we learn the details of their harrowing journeys. Equally as concerning, however, is the fact that unaccompanied children only make up 20% of those apprehended crossing the border illegally. And as the brave men and women of our Border Patrol are pulled away from their law enforcement duties to give humanitarian aid, drug cartels, human traffickers, individual criminals are exploiting this tragedy for their own criminal opportunities. Over the years, I have repeatedly called on the federal government to live up to its responsibility of protecting this great nation by securing the border. Because if there is no national security, you cannot have that without security. Since 2008, more than 203,000 criminal aliens have been booked into Texas county jails. Over the course of years, these individuals have committed more than 640,000 crimes. And that is in the state of Texas alone. This includes more than 3,000 homicides and almost 8,000 impacted forever. All because the federal government's lip service and empty promises. I will not stand idly by while our citizens are under assault and little children from Central America are detained in squalor. We are too good a country for that to occur. That is why today I am using my executive authority as governor of Texas and activating the National Guard. I've directed Adjutant General John Nichols to immediately prepare for deployment up to 1,000 of his troops in support of the Department of Public Safety's ongoing surge operation. It is codenamed Operation Strong Safety all along the border region. Prior to Operation Strong Safety, Texas has already invested $500 million in border security. That is a burden that Texas taxpayers should not have to burden themselves with. But as all of the Texans who have fallen victim to the crime at hand of these criminal aliens will attest to, the price of inaction is too high for Texans to pay. Now, to week 3, apprehensions have dropped 36%. From more than 6,600 per week to 4,200 per week in that area of operation. This is a clear indication that the increased patrol presence and the coordinated law enforcement efforts between our local, state, and
that's enough, Randy.
federal partners, including...
We can cut the feed there. I think that gives us a pretty good idea what Governor Perry finally was forced to do. And also the fact that it's being borne by our Texas state people, which really should be a federal burden because it puts the whole nation in danger. One of the articles that's posted up here, too, on Drudge, is 100,000 illegal alien gang members in Texas. So if only 20% of these children are literally refugees, which should be brought by air-conditioned buses across the border from their host nations, and by the way, they're created, those disasters, because from our own sources, we talked about this as Tim Alexander and other sources, that we have CIA operatives killing off native Guatemalan males that are literally forcing mothers to flee with their babies. That's part of our operations to balkanize and create a crisis. In fact, they were hiring people 6 months before for the crisis to handle it. Okay, this is the federal government. and their affiliates, and also who we want to find out who paid for the radio stations and television stations to broadcast it. If you go to America, even if you're a gang member, you're not going to be turned away. So this is a disaster that Obama and his wackies that wanted to bring a new, quote, immigration law to create a new underclass, or we call gruel class, to bring in a lot of criminals, not just people from Central and South America, but terrorists, real terrorists, from countries that we are, quote, about to be at war with, like Iran, etc., ISIS, etc., that will do horrendous things to Americans, including EMP weapons, chemical, biological, terrorism on airliners or buses, God knows what. And if things really break out, a real war breaks out, this is why, to be honest with you, the logic of the Israelis, why the Israelis have made such a vile attack against Gaza, things they should have done years ago to close off these tunnels, to stop all these weapons from coming in. They now have finally decided that they have to do it, otherwise if they don't, when a real shooting war gets going, most of the Israeli population will die when the rocket war starts and their Iron Dome and Patriot systems don't work. John, your comments. This is really good news, isn't it?
Well, it is good news. Jerry Brown's nickname used to be Governor Moonbeam, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's when he was Linda Ronstart's boyfriend, I think, Mr. Governor Moonbeam.
We got Arizona, New Mexico, and California share a border with Mexico as well as Texas. Hopefully this will help these other three governors. I don't have much faith in Governor Brown, but the other two governors possibly will do the right thing and deploy National Guard along the border. And I fully expect tomorrow morning the Attorney General of the United States to make a speech, make a statement that what's going on is racist. That would be consistent with what he's done in the past, wouldn't it, Doctor?
I think it's one of 100+ things that should get Obama impeached. What's amazing to me, impeachment of Obama is basically almost ceremonial to make sure that the current regime, which is Valerie Jarrett and the hundreds of other bureaucrats and people in the Justice Department like, Eric Holder, who now tries to do race baiting to say that people just don't like him because he's black. We don't care what skin color you are, guy. I mean, come on, let's get real.
Well, to have a country, Doctor, you have to have well-defined borders that are recognized by international authorities. And every country I'm aware of, with the exception of us, defends those borders and controls who gets to come across that border. It's an outrage. It's in the face of all modern history not to defend your border and let people freely come across, which is what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I want the immigration streamlined, lower fees, more efficient, but I want people properly trained in English and geopolitical studies. I want to make sure that no criminals get in here, including if they serve in the military. And if you have... Here's John. That's pretty shocking stuff what's going on the Drudge Report. And, of course, the number of death toll is just insane. Bloody death toll is probably over 600 now. They say 500 plus. It's well over 600. And, even Obama had to apologize and say he's concerned about the actions of the... when you have a lady on a wheelchair waving a white flag saying, please don't blow me up, and a tank comes through with missiles and so on, that's not really going to meet good press, especially when the camera shots and the video gets to the public.
No, not at all.
And not only that, it's also the Israeli parents of those young men that are being stupidly sent into basically a kill box, which in the military, because you start moving tanks in there when they got rocket-propelled grenades and tank-killing weapons, which the Hamas has, those guys that think they're in the big, lumbering tanks, they're dead. I mean, they're not going to make it out of there in those streets and alleyways. They're going to die trying to do what they do.
Tanks got no place in confined urban areas. It's just a death trap for those men in those tanks is all it is.
Right. So the idea of sending in Israeli young men, when they get into Gaza City, it's okay when they're on the outskirts, but when they get into Gaza City, they're going to die. Right. And, of course, what it's eventually going to do is it's going to force groups like Hezbollah that has some really big sucker missiles that can carry major payloads like fuel air bombs and biological chemical weapons and dirty bombs. It's going to force Iran and it's going to force Russia to start doing something. And they may not do anything right away, but when things start to rip, it's going to get really unpleasant. Most of our military bases are going to be target number one. If you're a military in a Navy ship out there in the Gulf of Mexico, the Persian Gulf, if you're in a military base in the Middle East, Qatar, and these other places, you're going to meet your God. you're going to meet your God, because when those missiles start flying in, believe me, there's nothing that the American military or Saudi Arabia has to stop them. Okay, so get a message here today. If you're listening in these countries, you better get a life and realize when these missiles start flying, you can't stop a barrage. Even if you got Patriot 2 Iron Dome systems, or the U.S. government's decide to give you theater air defense in Saudi Arabia, you're still going to be toast. Okay?
Right. Well, all you got to do is overwhelm the system. All those systems, the Patriots and the Iron Dome, can only handle so many missiles at the same time.
Well, they only have so many missiles too. They run
50, and you overwhelm it with numbers, is what you do.
Yeah, and also just the number of missiles they have there. They're really expensive missiles, and they only have a certain number in their missile battery. So, if they have 50 missiles and they send in a barrage, the first couple they're going to knock out if you know which missile it is and it's coming. But once you get multiple missiles, or you run out of anti-missile systems, you're done. It doesn't matter if you got fancy, shiny missile batteries. You don't have any more missiles to shoot down the missiles coming in. So either way, you're toast. And I think the public needs to realize, too, and this is a policy document that came out 2 years ago from Israel, those systems, Iron Dome and Patriot, are only, and I mean, this word is for you in Israel, if you haven't already emigrated out of there, if you're a dual citizen of Israel and somewhere else, get the heck out of there now, because those systems are only to protect military target sites, like military bases or places like Dimona. If you are seeing a missile heading toward Tel Aviv or other places, it may be inadvertently for news media to tell you they're going to knock it out. But if they get a large missile barrage heading toward a military target in a city, they're going to try to re-aim their missile systems to knock out and protect a military target, not Tel Aviv or some other town or city in Israel. That's reality. And if you don't know that, and you can go back and check it out yourself, don't believe me, we've actually talked to people in Israel and elsewhere to find out the facts, you're going to die. And you're going to die being blown to bits or affected by a biological or fuel air bomb, which is like equivalent to the blast force of a small nuke. It's not pleasant. And the fact is that the kind of game that these maniacs and the bankers are playing right now can get out of control really dang quick. And I really think we're on the edge of a disaster that will probably precipitate the peace treaty that's called the peace treaty that they will break in the 7 years. And you mentioned on the break, John, interesting comment. I'd like you to expand on it, that to a great extent, these big countries like Russia and America, on one level, are collaborating and trying to make a deal. But They also have contingencies, and if those contingencies aren't met on a specific time schedule, they have alternative responses to that. Now, the major chess player, Russia, has got a whole lot of contingencies that will tie Mr. Obama up in knots. So he's not going to play good chess with Mr. Putin or with the Chinese or anybody else. So as a result, America is really, being a rookie, is going to end up screwing up America very badly in geopolitical terms and financial terms and otherwise. And our allies, like the Europeans, that are freaked out by Obama's motions last week again to persecute Russia and its oil industry, and the fact that it's the primary oil and gas supplier to Germany and Europe, that's a real problem when, if they decide to just drive the price up or to cut off the supply, Europe is going to crash and the whole world economy will crash. And we're not talking about years away, we're talking about months. That's really scary.
It is really scary. And you're right, Doctor. There's backups on the backups on the backups. Nothing is left to chance. If Plan A fails, Plan B is in place, ready to go immediately, followed by Plan C if necessary, and so forth.
Let's switch the gears then to Plan. Let's put it this way. As you've said all along, we know that these rookies that are running the world try to pretend to each other they're in control. They try to pretend to the billionaires who aren't evil and crazy that they're going to make things okay, and they're not. They're going to screw everything up. So the rich people that we've been in contact with are completely freaked out by these stupid and demonically possessed maniacs who are basically not running the world very well. And so we need to prepare for the fact of, I call like the postman with Kevin Costner. We need to prepare ourselves for spiritual preparation, physical preparation, getting yourself in shape, off the drugs, getting yourself ready with nutraceuticals to take care of yourself and your family from biological weapons, being prepped spiritually and ready otherwise to the degradation of society where it's going to go, it'll be like Road Warrior in real. So, John, what's your recommendations today? Because I don't know when it'll happen, but
a couple of new sources to get the emergency medical supplies. One is Survival Metric Metrics, plural, survivalmetrics.com, and another one is buyemp.com. And you mentioned another one that you have at your website.
Yeah, we have one on our website called the Ready Store. And if you go to our website, Ready Store has a lot of medical equipment. It's really, really good for that. But these are good. Survival Metrics, METRICS, and the other one you mentioned is what's it called?
By EMP, Echo Mike Papa.
By EMP. By the way, we have EMP protection equipment, a whole pile of it over at the Les EMF. They're really, really good at the EMP protection. Bags for around your computers, barrier, electromagnetic barriers, things you can put in your roof. And we talked about it before. If you're going to have a metal roof, and we answered Santiago's question there last week, run only one copper wire line and drive it deep into the ground, at least 8 feet.
8 feet.
Not 2.
Yep.
Yeah. And then if you do that, and then you can also hang a mesh from even inside your attic. You don't have to have it all nailed down like a roof. You can have these EMP meshes and bring that one wire down. You can also, most people don't realize that EMP pretty well comes vertically right over the roof. So you don't have to have stuff hanging over your windows.
You don't need to worry about the sides too much.
Nah, the sides are really inconsequential. And even if you have just a aluminum drum, like an aluminum garbage can, you can stick a lot of your stuff, like your ham radio and other things, inside there. Make sure it's not plugged in and not grounded, because if it's grounded, you can get a ground current that can fry it too. Because when EMP hits, it creates ground currents that can backwash into your system, or if it's on an antenna.
Well, doctor, you want to have cardboard or a blanket between the electronic device and the metal of the can.
Yeah.
So there's no direct contact.
That's really important too. So, yeah, when I'm looking at this here, it says emergency medical products. It's the Buy EMP, emergency medical products is that. That's a good one. And they got physician's office, EMS, teaching and training. That's really good. Oh, yeah, all kinds of good stuff. And then, of course, the other site is Survival Metrics. Ooh, that's really cool. Tactical and Navy, that's really advanced. Like shelter, signaling, survival tools, urban survival. Yeah, really important. I tell people, do a little bit every month. Don't freak out. Don't break your budget.
Make your list and prioritize it, and work on the highest priority first.
Yeah, and then the first I tell people to do is get your bug out bag ready, get the kind of a survival emergency 3 days to 2 week equipment ready. Get a dehydrator and start making your own dehydrated food, or buy some for either Ready Store, or my favorite is our other equipment supplier. When we come back, we'll talk about it for a second, but it's important to kind of prep every day, spiritually and otherwise, because bad things happen to good people, and things are going to happen. Well, those websites are really cool, John. Survivalmetrics.com, and of course the other site, is the site called Buy EMP. I like the Ready Store in terms of their basic equipment. The Ready Store, and of course for survival food, we've got our really great equipment suppliers, such as let's see now here.
Well, Doctor, what I tell people when it comes to this topic is get the medical equipment equal to your skill level, and do not attempt to use medical equipment you're not qualified to use, because you can cause harm or even kill somebody.
Well, yeah, and some of the things are really simple. For example, one of the pieces of equipment that I tell people to learn skills, even if you don't have to use it, is to learn the skills how to evacuate a pneumothorax. Because you can have someone you get your basic training on basic trauma support, and you need to know if someone's got a crush. Let's say they had a tree fall on them or a piece of their house because they had an earthquake.
Right.
Or they got a punctured lung and they're developing a pneumothorax, and you have to be able to evacuate that. All you have to do is go into the second interspace on the lung on the side, because the immediate stem is going to be pushed over to the opposite side, and you'll see the trachea there, and you'll hear funny breath sounds if you're listening with a little stethoscope. And you just need to puncture a hole there with a little kind of evacuator tube, but you can get basically as part of an equipment. And all you have to do is just swab it off with some Nutridyne, stick it in there, and all of a sudden it's got a little valve. It'll release all that pressure, and they're not going to die on you, because they're going to die in a matter of minutes if you don't evacuate that air. And a lot of times it's just a broken rib that punctured the lung, and you're developing a pneumothorax.
Right.
Pretty simple way, and they'll survive. So, John, when you're looking at all the different news and you hear all the things that are happening, without setting dates, what kind of prognostication would you say are the quote scenarios?
Well, here's a date that we all can understand, which is 3 to 5 weeks. That's when public schools open, 3 to 5 weeks. And we don't know how many hundreds, possibly thousands of these unfortunate youngsters with diseases from Central and South America will be in our public schools, sitting in the same classrooms with our American students. So that's a date I can live with and not have to make any predictions, because that's a fact. 3 to 5 weeks from now, the public schools will open, and our government will be integrating these youngsters into the public schools.
Right. We also have new diseases showing up. For example, fatal mosquito virus is found in Massachusetts on Drudge. West Nile virus reaches Tulsa. Chikungunya fever found in Palm Beach, Florida. It's already up in Georgia. These kids that are coming up here are bringing up swine flu, which is a new version of the H1N1 flu that swept through America in 2009. We also have multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, lice. It's not really a pleasant thing. And these kids should probably be treated. You're giving them Army medics is stupid. They should probably be treated humanely, decontaminated, a culture to the culture. They're really refugees. We're dealing with different populations, like Governor Perry has stated. Only 20% of these are unaccompanied children. And really, 80% of them are people that are kind of coming in here. They're either teenagers, many of them are gang members, or they're plain criminals that have no business coming across the border, but they're going to use this opportunistically to get in. We're going to have a surge of diseases, plus we're not, you see, I don't mind how many more people come here. A lot of people say, well, you can't have an extra 100 million. Yes, we can. If you do NWAPA, North American Water and Power, if you go and bring in, we call, nuclear fusion energy, which we have, if you make major projects like, the Grand Canyon project to put in the Hoover Dam and the America gas lines and high-speed rail. We have giant projects that if you put all these people to work that have skill sets, or they can learn the skill sets, we could rebuild America, and that's what we should do. I think that our big problem is we don't have grand visions anymore, like with John F. Kennedy. We don't realize that we should be the leader nation to say this is how we rebuild America. We don't take the attitude of people first. We don't take the attitude of America first. Don't get involved in foreign entanglements, which is why they're after Rand Paul. I think Rand Paul would make an excellent president, because even though he's a little close to Israel, he also doesn't believe in what I call excessive entanglements. Yeah, I support Israel. I don't want them to be dismembered or divided. I think we should annex Israel and make it the 51st state. And I'd tell you, the Muslim countries would think twice about attacking one of the states of the United States, because we'd whack them hard. Then I would send in special forces in Delta and clean up the rat's nest of all the weapons they have. They wouldn't have a tunnel bringing in rockets in from Iran or anywhere else into Gaza. And we weren't worried about having counterattacks by Israel after the rockets head toward various places. I would move into places like Lebanon and target them from space and make sure that anybody anywhere that has any weapon system we don't agree with, we just clean it out. And we don't have to kill a lot of civilians to do that. What they're doing right now is what I call too late and too stupid. The Israelis should have done this 20 years ago, but they didn't. And, it's the same with our government. We let drug cartels get away with murder, and then when a whole pile of them come across the border, we complain. When, how much of this 80% that's not these unaccompanied minors are actually just gang members or druggies? They're going to be involved with drugs.
There's gang members, there's Muslims, there's people from West Africa, there's Chinese. Right. It's a hodgepodge.
Right, and by the way, the ones from West Africa might be coming here with Ebola. If this really truly is what we call the super weapon Ebola, which, the movie Contagion a few years ago, this could get really dicey, especially in really big cities with compact populations. I know I did infectious disease before I went into medicine in 1973, and this Ebola has all the characteristics of becoming a super plague.
It does.
You got a disease.
The official body count from Ebola in West Africa is 1,000 plus, but the real number is probably two to four times that much, easily.
My guess is it's probably 4,000, and if it has what's called, Ann's talked about this, if it has what's called an exponential doubling time, what it means is where it's 4,000 now, by the fall it'll be like a couple 100,000.
Right.
When you got something a couple 100,000, you're going to end up having to close borders across the West African nations. And by the way, that won't work because you got jungle and everything else. And then, of course, these people are leaking out and getting on boats and ending up in other countries like Morocco and getting off to Europe. There was a boat literally that arrived, I think, 3 months ago, that arrived up in northern Italy, not even southern Italy, and it was from North Africa, and at least, I don't know how many of those group of people, but there were a number of them that had obvious Ebola, and they were literally bleeding out right there on the spot, having hemorrhagic diathesis, and, you know, the final stages where they're going to go see Allah, whoever they believe in, they're going to go see him.
Right.
So, you know, if these things start to spread, and again, maybe they just need a little final push or metabolic tweak, or they become even more spreadable. But the incubation period and length of time they can shed virus before they become terminal is very scary. And it's just like this multi-drug.
It's a really long time. Yep.
The same thing as a multi-drug. I've been on wards where we took care of people with TB. You got multi-drug resistant TB. What the hell are you going to do? I mean, as a doctor and an infectious disease expert, you scratch your head and say, what the heck? Now, we have nutraceuticals that can knock it out and prevent you from getting infected, and you have to go real high dosages, but the regular doctors, they're running out of drugs. I mean, that's why we're in the post-antibiotic era. We're in a time now where if you go into hospital and they throw everything at you. They throw in, they'll throw in Augmentin, they'll throw in, moxifloxacin, and they'll throw in every possible new advanced drug and chemo agent they can to turn off the pathogen. And a lot of time they can't. And in places like Soweto, they not only have multi-drug resistant, they have what's called total resistant TB. You get it, you got 21 days, and you're dead, and it's 100% fatal. Once they diagnose you with what's called, not just XMDR TB, but this is it's called XMDR TB, you're dead. You got 21 days from diagnosis to death. That's the average.
That's as scary as it gets, doctor.
That's as scary as it gets. Now, the thing that in a sense is good about diseases like that is that when the person is that sick, they're usually in an isolation ward, so they're not going to spread it. But when you got Ebola and you can shed virus for weeks before you get violently ill and bleed out, that's extremely scary, especially if these people are mobile. The only thing that's been prevailing is that people are really poor and it's hard for them to travel.
Right.
So a lot of them will also hide in their villages until it wipes out much of their population. What I see happening...
That's what they do.
What I think will happen, too, and the same thing's going on in China with H7N9. You're not hearing reports in China because they don't want you to freak out that they can't stop it. They don't want you to tell you that the SARS beta coronavirus is going crazy in Saudi Arabia and other countries in Europe even. Hot spots in Spain and Germany and elsewhere where it's popping up.
It's bad for business.
It's bad for, you're bad for business. You don't want tourism or your business to shut down because they think you're carrying a super plague.
That's right.
So it's a strange world out there.
Liberty Man signing off. It's good to be with you as always.
Yeah, John, we covered a lot of good stuff. It was good to hear that report from Governor Perry. I hope that maybe it'll tweak the usurper-in-chief, the White House, and the other state governors to, deal humanely with these refugees on the one hand and put in a sense, a prison-type environment until they constantly can repatriate to their home country these other people who may be criminals who have no business being here.